Alright, what's going on YouTube? Miguel here, and today I'm bringing you guys another episode of Project Pony. Wait, that's not what we're doing today, is it? I'm kidding. So a couple months ago I did this YouTube challenge trend from back in the day where you talk about 5 things you love about your car and 5 things you hate about your car. So today I got the Project Mustang in the garage, and that's actually what we're doing today. This right here is 5 things I love about my SN95 Mustang. Let's get into it.
Guitar like a young Santana, rapping VT like my name Bernie Sanders, living 2 lives like my name.
Alright, so before we get into it, I'm not gonna lie, this video was actually pretty hard to make. Finding 5 things I like about this car was kind of hard, not gonna lie. The video next week, 5 things I hate about this, that one was super easy, but this one, I don't know, I had to think about it, and think about it, and think about it, and then finally I came up with 5 things. Technically 6, but, you know, we're not gonna get into technicalities right now. You know, this car is not the fastest, not the best looking, it's not, you know, the most sought after, it's not really a great car, not even a good car, especially the condition mine's in. So if you guys could, you know, drop a like for this video, I would greatly appreciate it. Alright, so number 5. It's easy to work on. So this car is from the 90s. Back then they didn't really have all this technology that most cars do nowadays. It's super easy to work on. There's really nothing difficult about it. You don't have to take off a whole bunch of like plastic covers and a whole bunch of other stuff like you do with most modern cars. And if you don't believe me, I have an entire YouTube series dedicated to working on this car and getting it back into pristine condition. If you haven't checked that out, check it out. If you're new to the channel, of course, go and take a look at that. That's my main series on here. Take it from me, as someone who works on cars on the daily, there's nothing I hate more than when a BMW, a Mercedes, a Volkswagen, or anything like that comes into the shop. It's not that they're difficult to work on, it's just a lot of modern cars have a whole lot of technology, which means you have to take a bunch of stuff out of the way to get to the part you're trying to work on. And you know, that's not the case with this car. This car is super easy. Whatever you want to work on, you can just dive into. You don't have to do a whole bunch of prep just to fix one simple issue that you may have with your car. And number 4, I've grown with this car. So I've had this car for about 6 years. I bought it back in 2016. I'm not going to tell the whole story. You guys probably know. If you don't know, then check out my first video. I've essentially grown with this car, not only as a person, but also as a YouTube mechanic. So when I first got this car, I didn't really know anything about working on cars. I didn't really know what I was doing. I still kind of don't. You see, I've had this car for such a long time that I've transformed it so many times, and right now I'm at the latest iteration of that. Honestly, I see this as a reflection of myself. I see this car as a work in progress. It's not at the final product yet, but we're gonna get there. You know, just trust the process. It may be a little rough around the edges right now, but it's gonna glow up. Just like I said, trust the process. So on number 3, it's uniqueness. So driving around town in my other Mustang, I don't really see that many SN95s out on the road anymore. That's probably because, you know, these aren't the best cars, they're not the most sought after. And the fact that these cars are at least 24 to 29 years old at the time of recording this just goes to show that, you know, there's not that many left on the road. If I can preserve one and, you know, have it looking nice, then, you know, that's something I want to do. This car's a piece of history and I intend on keeping it. I don't think the SN95 gets as much love as, you know, let's say like a New Edge or a Fox body. You know, the generations that came before and after this, as well as, you know, a modern Mustang. So again, I want to keep this around just because, you know, you don't really see that many of those, and pretty soon they'll all be gone. And number 2, they're cheap, but they're cheap in a good way and cheap in a bad way. I'm not going to get into the cheap in a bad way. We're going to do that next week. But cheap in a good way, what I mean by cheap in a good way is the fact that these cars don't really get as much love as I feel like they should. Yes, they're not the best cars and there's not really a market for them, so you can actually pick one of these up pretty cheap. If you want to get into the car scene and, you know, you don't really know where to start, but you want to do something like, you know, has a V8 American Muscle, something like that, and, you know, you're balling on a budget, go ahead, get you an SN95. You can get one in decent condition for about, you know, $3,000–4,000. If you want to go the full project car route like I did, then you're looking at like $1,000 or less. Probably going to cost you a lot more than that. And then, you know, if you want one that's like in decent condition where you don't have to do that much to it, then you are going to fork out, you know, a good chunk of money. Nothing too crazy. I'm talking about like maybe $5,000 to $7,000. Again, it's not a crazy amount of money. These cars are pretty affordable. Speaking of affordable, not only are these cars cheap, but the parts for them are cheap too. The fact that this is a Ford and a Ford Mustang pretty much means that Ford pumped out a ton of these out in the 90s. You can find parts for them online for pretty cheap. The most expensive thing you could probably buy for one of these are like, you know, like a blower or something like that. Again, every single mod you would possibly need for these, other than, you know, wheels and tires, is going to cost you like less than $1,000. All in all, this year I probably spent around like maybe around like $2,000 or $3,000 just on parts with this, and I've come a pretty long way with this project. Again, that may seem pretty pricey, but if you compare the cost of the parts for this project versus the cost of the parts for, you know, let's say my other Mustang, you're looking at about like 10 times the price for, you know, something new or something modern. There's not really much of a market for these, so supply and demand. Everything's pretty cheap. All right, so before I get into number one, I have some honorable mentions I have to mention. As I touched briefly early in this video, this thing is about 24 years old. At the time of recording, it is December 2022, so as soon as January hits, this thing is 25 years old. I'm out here in Texas, and for a car to be considered a classic, it has to be at least 25 years old, and we're pretty much there with this thing. But the fact that this car is 25 years old, it's survived this long, this thing is a trooper. All right, so I'm currently in here editing the video you guys are watching right now, and I thought about a couple honorable mentions I left out. The car is quiet, so whenever I start it up, I don't wake up the whole neighborhood, which, you know, really helps out whenever I go for a little late night drive. And that's probably, you know, one of the only times having a quiet car is useful. Right after I filmed this video, I actually took the car on a little drive just because I haven't, you know, driven it in about 3-4 weeks, something like that. And, you know, just driving the car brings back so many memories. It just gives me so much nostalgia. Anytime I get in the car, it takes me back to summer 2016, summer 2017, back when me and my old friend group were doing a bunch of stupid stuff. Just so many good memories. And the other one that I didn't really think about, you know, when I first filmed the video that I probably should have, the car's been in my family for 2 generations now. It belonged to my uncle and it belongs to me now, so by default I have to pass it down to my future nephew. And the number one thing, I've talked about this before, I'll say it again, this right here was my first car. So for as much as I bash this car, for as much as I hate it, this is my first car. You know, when it comes to cars, this thing was my first love. This thing gave me my first real taste of freedom, and honestly, I wouldn't trade that for the world. We've had some amazing memories. We have like so many stories I wish I could tell. If this car could speak, it would have stories for days. There were also a bunch of not so good stories, a bunch of not so good nights, but I think the good memories kind of outweigh the bad. And you know, that's part of the reason why I never sold this car. The fact that I still have it, the fact that I'm still working on it, trying to, you know, bring it back to life, you put it back together, you know, have it look amazing. It's just, I don't know. It's kind of like your first love, you know, you never forget. If I were to sell this car, I knew I would instantly regret it. And honestly, through all the good and through all the bad, I'm always going to have a soft spot for this car. And yeah. Alright, so that's going to be it for this video. That was 5 things I love about my SN95 Mustang. Make sure you guys like this video. Comment down below what's one thing you like about the SN95 Mustang. And subscribe because I make Mustang videos every Monday.